Thank you for the short video, sir. Now I'd like to hand over the session to Dr. Mark Cawman.
Well, thank you. And technology. Technology, yes, it's a disruptor. Yes, it's also an enabler that affects the global strategic management of firms. But what is technology? Is it those ones and zeros in a binary language of coding? Is it interconnectedness that we've come to know in the Internet of Things? Is it electronics in our hands? Is it the computers, PCs, the laptops, that which we wear on our wrist in wearable electronics? Is it possibly even something in the future that can be implanted in our bodies, as some might suggest? Or is it this world of robotics and the new buzzword of artificial intelligence and data analytics? What is technology? Well, let's consider a more basic and a more holistic definition and take a look back in time. It all starts with this idea of the word technique. If we think about that, a way, a method, maybe a skill or a specific way of a procedure, task, job, or a process, this could be certainly tacit, or it could be very codified and scientific, could be somewhere in between. But the reality of it is if we can take and work smarter instead of harder through the application of either some type of scientific knowledge, some great breakthrough, some knowledge, invention, to have a tool, maybe an equipment, a software, or some other aid to perform that technique and perform it instead of the human intervention or in assistance to the human intervention, we can call that technology. You say, well, that's not really what we were thinking of. You know, if you don't believe me, let's take a historical look back. Let's think about maybe the period of before 1740. Somewhere between 1740 and 1780, there was this period just before the Industrial Revolution 1.0. Human power, man, oxen, horses was the norm. And suddenly we had this new technology as we harnessed steam and water power. We think about it suddenly revolutionized techniques that had been used for centuries and millenniums, using all of these initial human oxen and horsepower. And suddenly now we have a steam-powered tractor that's replacing a team of oxen. Liveries and coaches are now pulled by steam locomotives. Grist mills are mechanized, and instead of depending on a team of horses walking in a circle or some type of a hand mill. This is technology. Since the advent of Industry 3.0 and 4.0, we carry into new terminologies that we know today. We now have this word called tech, where it is companies that actually design, innovate, and make technology. We now have also companies that are considered more what we call high tech. And these are ones that have applied various technology at some high level of automation, robotics, or otherwise replacing, aiding, or enhancing human labor. Finally, we have this new era. And this new era is that of data analytics and big data informing the strategic management process, the marketing process, and many other things that we do in business. And we know this really as technology enabled. And this not only assists business intel and inputs and affects decision making, but it also changes managerial foci. To further realize and understand how technology has advanced, we can take a quick tour through our various industrial revolutions or industrial ages, as we call them. We will even include the Grandpa's proposed Industry 6.0 from his article, because I think that will be germane to our discussion today. We can see that after that first advent of steam and water, then we began to suddenly have homes, businesses, and entire industries and factories experience electrification. At the same time, the internal combustion engine was operationalized and began to take a place. And we also, right along with that, we saw assembly lines and mass production start to replace the idea of single piece unit. While that was taking place, Industry 2.0 is such a great lesson on what a technological disruption can mean. We already know that in Industry 1.0, people experienced new means, new tools to aid in those techniques. But in 2.0, we also begin to see how there's other things that are involved. We begin to see entirely new modalities and methods that caused even further technological revolutions. We saw in those early assembly lines where Henry Ford brought the Model T to the masses instead of just the wealthy. And that actually caused an entire new economy, a new supply and demand, a new market. Additionally, just like steam and water, electrification, internal combustion engine were new forms of energy. It was also a new form of transportation. Technological changes can shrink distances, improve communication. They can affect not only that means, they can provide new energy, they can provide new transportation, communication, connection, they can drive new markets, new economies. Every evolution has brought about opportunity, but every technology has also brought its challenges. Today, we have new challenges. Pollution. We know the physical, emotional, and psychological tolls on human and their environments as we've experienced technology take over areas in people's lives, reducing maybe the meaningfulness of work in some ways. Industry 5.0 certainly aims to have a better idea of technology and humans working together. And then in Industry 6.0, Grumpus suggests that there be this entire meta revolution that overlaps with Industry 4.0 and 5.0. This can use technology and human logic to entirely re-engineer technology for a meta redesign to focus around human thriving and sustainability as a more anthropocentric approach. This is necessary lest technology continue to run ahead of controls, regulations, limits, and threaten some of our jobs and our existence as we may know it today. This reimagination could once again create new means. It can create new energy, transportation, communication, connection. It can drive new markets, drive new economies. So we have experienced that technological change has been less linear and it's been more exponential. We've seen disruptive changes for both good and bad for over 3 centuries now. So what does this mean to the strategic planning process for business? Situational dynamics have always challenged strategic management's core purpose. The core purpose of strategic management is often articulated as this developing goals and objectives, and then articulating how to achieve those with plans, objectives, and deployed throughout the organization. Factors, and especially external, do not become static for a planning process. When we think about a 1, 3, and 5-year plan, certainly the factors around us don't necessarily become static. You just let our wonderful plan evolve. Matter of fact, over the past 7 to 8 years, a myriad of factors have impacted so many industries. In 2016, Europe experienced the fraction of the UK leaving with Brexit. The US elected Donald Trump, who disrupted the almost linear trade policies that have been in place since Bretton Woods of the last century. imposing tariffs, pulling out of agreements, geopolitically rocking relationships, and then seeing long-standing commerce partners leave and cooling relations. Then in the 20s, had multiple industries experience this global pandemic, reduced and interrupted supply chain. We've seen hybrid workforces and an entire culture of workers quitting, going remote and hybrid and virtual. We've seen changed geopolitical landscapes with including the US and China relations, the China and Taiwan tensions, a Russo-Ukrainian war, war in the Middle East, continued political partisanship in several countries, certainly including the US, at levels we have not necessarily seen in years. Additionally, technological transitions are leading the industry revolution into Industry 5.0, with artificial intelligence arriving on the scene and making its presence loud and clear. We've seen alternative energy innovations and demands. Technology is certainly one very significant area that can be disruptive, cause turbulence in any industry. Let's qualify industry. What I mean by industry is, we say the coffee industry, the education industry, aerospace, hospitality, so forth. And it's the sector of the market or economy in which a business may operate and function. Any factor or disruption or turbulence that will certainly affect some industries more than others. But Henry Mintzberg, the famous father of emergent strategy, he said forecasting discontinuities such as technological advances is almost impossible. And he used this to suggest the idea of the 1, 3, and 5-year plan and structured strategic planning processes may not even work due to their very dynamic turbulence. The future is unknown, but there are needs, and every time that there's needs, necessity tends to beget invention. We are absolutely going more and more electric, and yet the grid is already overwhelmed in many areas. I live in Southern California. It's pretty routine to see rolling periods of blackout during periods in the summer when there's high temperatures and a lot of air conditioners are run. We are advancing battery technologies with limited resources, and in some cases, mines that haven't even been dug yet, unknown supply of some of the things that we might take to make those. We're touting a cleaner future, and yet we may not necessarily know the end of life disposal issues facing us with many things, batteries included. Part of the issue of transportation is this whole concept that we've adopted since the invention of the automobile, that it takes a multi-ton unit to move a 75-kilogram human from point A to point B and from the here to the there. Additionally, surface acreage in many cities is not really lending to further infrastructure. So it is very likely that an air taxi or some other human conveyance mechanism may continue to be in our future. One way or the other, we can almost guarantee that energy, transportation, and some of these other things will continue to experience revolutions and change. Next, in akin to this Grompus Industry 6.0 and the more anthropocentric shift in the technological architectures, this could recenter humans in a way that encourages human thriving. Karl Marx made a really interesting statement. He said he believed that machinery, when fully automatic, rather than just being a tool or an aid, would switch places with the worker, and the worker would have to begin to serve it as an alien power. Certainly, a meta redesign could rectify this, but regardless of what takes place, there will likely be continued improved means via next level AI and interconnectivity, and all of this will likely breed new or transitioned economies and markets. The concept of turbulence when it comes to strategy and an industry environment is not new. Back in the 1950s, Emery and Trist were scholars that did a lot of research and focused in this area. And then in the 1960s, they were followed by and picked up by Igor Ansoff. We know him often as the father of strategic management. He created models that would categorize the industry environmental turbulence level, or an ETL, in various levels, and he would categorize the strategic aggressiveness of the firm and the firm's ability to respond, and try to basically see if those could align at each level. In more current research, turbulence is still a hot topic. In strategy, we've seen on this slide various terminologies used: the VUCA, the tuna, the fanning, the RUPT, so forth. And all of these continue to find that a significant precipitator of turbulence is technology. And all of these forms of turbulence suggest something that other than steady, predictable, ordinary, and defined, as we know, SPOD. It's clear technology is a disruptor. So if it's a disruptor but it still causes opportunity and chaos and turbulence in the industry, the firm's struggle with long-term planning is real. We struggle with the status quo potentially failing us and getting left behind. Certainly, Nokia, Blockbuster, plenty of other companies failed to keep up with their industry, and they were left behind. So, how can a firm actually use the technology to improve the strategic management process as an enabler? So when we think about Ansoff, we find that the environmental turbulence tends to basically work across 5 different levels in his model. Some recent criticisms suggest this is more stage gate, maybe not multivariate enough, and or linear. But we still find that everybody tends to gravitate back to some of these models because they are very effective, and they do actually speak into today and tomorrow's future. There is absolutely some discontinuous environments that can take place at a 4 or a 5 level. And if we're stuck in the past in our strategy at a 2 or a 3, then we're really not keeping up with that. So on the next slide, I want to talk a little bit about 2 examples. Industry 2.0, when it arrived with the electrification of the factories, the operationalization of the internal combustion engine, mass production and assembly lines, there was somebody to break that. And their firm's strategy responded aggressively, and they were able to respond with some agility that actually matched that level of turbulence that was taking place. Matter of fact, some of us remember the scientific management theory came roaring onto the scenes in Industry 2.0, credited to Frederick Winslow Taylor. He pushed for taking the pre-planning of task, work, and job and taking it offline so that the worker could actually focus on doing the work instead of making the everyday decisions. This brought about efficiency, it brought about consistency, and it brought about a lot of different opportunities that enabled some of that mass production. He did a lot of work in time studies, and he started trying to basically create quotas, all of those. Right along beside him, other scholars were continuing to research as well. We had Frank and Lillian Gilbreth. Humorously, his son wrote the book, Cheaper by the Dozen. Frank Gilbreth was the father of 12 children, and he practiced a lot of the motion study on his kids. But Frank and Lillian Gilbreth pushed for the reduction of motion and the elimination of a lot of unnecessary logistics. Simultaneously, Benjamin Gant came on the scene and began to conceptualize this whole idea of concurrent, sequential tasks, and maybe which tasks were predecessors to another, Today we know this is project management, and we're left with the Gantt chart bearing his name. All of this revolutionized strategic management in great ways, and yet it was not perfect. Matter of fact, it was so imperfect. Now, granted, it strategically and aggressively met the challenge of the day, but there was collateral. And that collateral was the such that there was human abuses and so forth. And what you saw after that was human resource departments began to come into play. We saw new policies, new laws, so forth and so on. The early Model T was rife with quality issues, and the advent of an actual quality department or inspection function began to come into place. We saw that the strategic aggressiveness was there, but the collateral was as well. Let's move forward to another era, another revolution. In Industry 3.0, we began to see that the computer arrived on the scene with millivolts and microelectronics, and it created the tech industry, and it revolutionized many and most other industries. This actually created an issue where they actually had to change the strategic management to actually have technology strategy. They actually were in a race to develop, deploy, and acquire technology. It created an entire new industry, entire new markets. It led to further innovations. And out of that, we now have really a new level of that which we call research and development, or R&D. Every strategic planning process that's in a good continuum has two things that occur: really good data-informed inputs and really good data-informed feedback or metrics to keep it in check, to guarantee that it continues to stay on track. When we think about this, how many strategic planning sessions in the past would have said, if I could just know what my customers really want or what they might buy? Well, enter big data, enter analytics. We now know what potential customers and customers are searching for. We know what they paused on. We know what they virtually shop. We have real data from the competition, and we have better demographic analysis than we've ever had before. We can even interact and engage with that audience. We can target advertise. When somebody pauses over certain things, you start to get targeted marketing that happens right along with it. We can offer virtual fitting rooms, try-ons. We can answer questions via chatbot and interact in that way. Our market analysis has never been stronger, thanks to technology. In addition, e-commerce made its way onto the scene over the last 15 to 20 years and has expanded the exposure and minimized the need for physical infrastructure. All of this is huge enabler to the strategic management process and huge opportunity to be included in that. In strategic planning, we often do an external and an internal analysis as part of the evaluation. And when we think about the external analysis, our industry environmental sphere not only uncovers the turbulence, but it also uncovers opportunity. Improved modeling of increased data can likely find and determine market trends, interest rates, inflation, and much more. This can not only improve our risk modeling, but it can also determine a lot of the short-term initiatives and what we're really going to do. And then some of the longer-term things can actually also give us better intel, play the odds in the greater time frame. We can look at the likelihood of the stock price relative to certain events and actions. A company by the name of Jack Henry and Associates is just one example. It creates benchmark studies from an industry, in this case, banking. They help provide predictive data of interest rates and similar. That can be very useful to many other industries as they try to make decisions for the short term and the long term in maybe big purchases and other things as part of that. When we move into the internal scan, a number of factors have now become better inputs to the strategic planning and improved data. Today, enterprise resource planning, or ERP systems, are often the software we find in firms. These software systems are fully integrated and fully deployed throughout the organization and interconnected. They take the sales and order intake and they automatically adjust inventory, open up a work order, send a purchase order to the supplier, and so forth throughout the firm. Workers often scan into jobs for very accurate labor tracking, help with cost analysis, and labor utilization. Before transitioning to academia, I spent 26 years in the industry split between aerospace and automotive. Most recently, I was vice president of an aerospace company, and we did a lot of plastic extrusion for the interiors of commercial aircraft. I got to go visit a trade show, and at this trade show, they were selling all of this plastic extrusion equipment, but along with it, they were selling extrusion-specific data analytics packages. Small sensors could be put throughout the manufacturing process and collect very strategic data. If a temperature, speed, and amperage load variation combination was experienced when you introduced a new box of material or resin from a new lot, then it would suggest that that material was different than the last batch in some way. And this data could be used to proactively adjust the settings to avoid some of that product that may be out of conformity to specification. But what is even more interesting is that it also created some longer term data that fed into the strategic management process that was less operational. If it detected rising motor temperature trends and increased amperage draw, these were predictors of a pending equipment failure or aging equipment. This could strategically be used to increase preventative maintenance resources, or in some cases, even plan the capital expenditures needed for the following year's budget. Throughout the firm, internal data is improved by technology, and it can enhance the strategic management process. Now, can we even imagine, as we begin to really realize AI and what it can do, if it can intuitively select and next level program the data that we need, our inputs are going to even be exponentially better to that process. A lot of the data analytics and the technology continue to execute the PDCA cycle. The plan, do, check, act. More frequent and dynamic data helps when we plan. We've established that. Frequent data updates from all internal and external sources. But additionally, in that check phase, we can get real data that's dynamic, that helps understand discontinuities that we have within the firm and also out there in the industry or marketplace. Real-time data from the SKU scanning of a sale, real-time data for who's clocked in on particular labor involving cost and cost realization, real-time data from material usage and or material scrap, all can feed back into understanding whether or not we're meeting our metrics as part of the strategic plan. When it comes to the do and the act portion, it's going to be interesting to see where AI actually takes us. Those next level queries, those next level commands, possibly those become in somewhat autonomous. New technology has absolutely been a disruptor, but the future can engage technology in new levels and ways to get multivariate alignment, strategic agility. If we look back to the turn of the millennium, when Goldman and Sachs coined the original BRIC, Brazil, Russia, India, and China, and then later added South Africa, forming the BRICS. They were a group of emerging economies targeted for foreign investment, for industry expansions and outsourcing, and much more. These were extrapolated data points projected all the way out to 2050. To actually absolutely freeze a set of countries on extrapolated data, we see did not work out well. We have some of these countries that absolutely met and exceeded expectations. We have some that did not. In the same period, others could have been added and or substituted more dynamically. This shows us that good agility informed by good data is better than trying to extrapolate a particular data set out for a long period. Just as technology is a disruptor, it absolutely brings new means. By means, we mean tools, techniques, and ways of accomplishing something. It brings new controls. It brings in a new economy with a whole new supply and demand, new markets. It brings new forms of energy, new transportation, and a future in the industry 5.0 and 6.0 can absolutely lean into this more anthropocentric meta redesign that centers around kind of the whole human thriving. The same in our future can continue to provide both these opportunities and enable strategy, similar to what we've seen in past revolutions. New controls are absolutely going to be expanded by AI as it moves from this extrapolation of data and instead uses better predictive modeling that's dynamic, agile. Better data is more dynamic as a strategic management input. New economies do not have to threaten the current offerings. In many cases, those may no longer be unknown because we have the advent of big data that is informing marketing strategy with what customers want and how and when the market is shifting. New energy can absolutely provide new means of connectivity beyond the power grid, potentially, beyond a cell phone signal or a cellular signal, and advanced connection and collaboration. New transportation similarly improves commutes. It can revolutionize logistics. It can shrink the world even further in global business. Amazon has certainly tried the drone deliveries, and the world of transportation technologies is likely to continue to be drastic, dynamic, and enabling. Finally, as we understand the good and the bad and the ugly of technology, and then we try to redesign that for a more human-centric or anthropocentric outcome with human thriving, certainly jobs and employment will continue to have significant new potentials that we can lean into and realize. Technology. Yes, it's a disruptor. Yes, it's an enabler in the firm's strategic management process, especially so in multinational and global contexts. Will it cripple and overwhelm your strategic planning, leaving your status quo unready for the changes and opportunities of today and tomorrow? Or will you be able to engage these technologies to fully take advantage of Industry 4.0 through Industry 6.0 in the ways that Henry Ford and others were able to exploit Industry 2.0? The future is now, and technology is here to help. Thank you. At this point in time, I'll open to the moderator. I think we've got some maybe chat questions or something, so we'll open to that.
Hello, sir. Hello, is it audible?
Yes.
Sir, I have a question. Uh, is there any possibilities that all human workers get replaced by AI? Because almost it's AI everywhere, but each and every human work will be replaced by AI, sir?
So when we talk about this kind of redesign that's envisioned in Industry 5.0 and 6.0, part of that is that very need for that. If we want to have AI basically replace meaningful livelihood and income, then it's gone beyond the idea of becoming an aid for a technique or helping us. And instead, we've moved into, as Karl Marx aptly put it, we are now serving the alien power. And that is something that is I think, a real threat and concern of many people when it comes to not just AI, but even before that, a lot of heavy automation. So the reality of it is if we can kind of reimagine how that anthropocentric, which that word literally means really kind of centered around the human. So we become kind of the center of that focus. And if we can do that, I think there is a meta redesign necessary. And I think we have to do some adjustments before technology runs ahead of the regulation controls and maybe some of the checks that might be on it.
Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon, sir. So when the session began, there was a slide presented and it said industrial and technological revolution. So that was this catchy topic which I noticed and was very different for me. So it was anthropocentric retooling of digital architecture. Would you like to brief us a little bit about that? Because it's a very new topic for us.
So I really will lean into the fact that Peter Grompos wrote this article proposing an Industry 6.0 with this meta redesign. And so I think that when I look at that, Industry 5.0 is already purposefully engineering, trying to basically figure out how humans and machines can work better together and try to bring a little bit more of maybe that balance as opposed to just financial efficiencies. In this Industry 6.0 is unique. And Grompos actually suggests that we take 4.0 and 5.0, as those two are almost right now overlapping, and we overlap 6.0 onto it. We begin starting before it's too late, sort of reimagining, as an example, AI. What is it that we actually want AI to do that we can do so where it truly does benefit the human existence and does not necessarily threaten us? And so how do we kind of reimagine where we're at and kind of look at that overall architecture? So I think it's an interesting point. And I think one of the points that we have to recognize and that I tried to draw out today was the fact that we have seen disruption, but we've also seen opportunity. And we've also seen how, as an example, Henry Ford and others adapted to Industry 2.0 and met that. And on an Ansoff level, we would say that this, at an aggressive level, they tried to match that particular industry turbulence. Today, we have this whole new industry turbulence. And I think it's asking the question, how can we be aggressive, answer that in a way this time? So I felt that it was an interesting research point and a new data point that we could certainly bring in with the Industry 6.0. And I recognize the fact that there may be other scholars that come up with a different 6.0, because this was one scholar's proposal.
Based on that question, we have a question from Julia in the chat, who asked, do you think data analysis jobs will increase in the future? If so, by how much?
Yeah, I think that, as we continue to work with data, one of the things that we're finding is that the data is now actually creating its own industry. We're starting to see third-party industries that actually manage data and sell the data. And I think that that's been kind of evolving as data analytics has been. So it absolutely has started to create its own industry. And that is not necessarily a bad thing, because somebody, yes, is absolutely is exploiting it for a new market. But additionally, some of those firms can specialize in trying to basically clean up and work on the quality of that data. Because otherwise, if everybody just took the greater data that's out there and tried to bring it together, it may not necessarily be necessarily clean.
We have a question from Mike Trong, and he asks, can you elaborate on the role of ethics in AI development and impact on the economy?
Absolutely. So one of the things that we were, talking about is the fact that right now we actually do believe that a lot of technology is running ahead of the checks, the balances, the regulations, and a lot of ethics. And so when those conversations happen, certainly, now we're left with these quandaries of is this acceptable? And we're even having questions in academia, in publishing, and how much AI is allowed, and so forth and so on, and where privacy barriers are in the medical industry, and so forth and so on. So we're playing catch up with it, and so I think playing catch up with the ethics is a little bit sad and dangerous. But the reality of it is it's not necessarily unexpected, because then let's go back to Industry 2.0. The reality of it is when the world was industrializing and going into mass production and so forth, they pushed humans to the point where they actually called a human expert. And the whole concept of retirement had to be born, because they literally had to get people out of the workforce because they couldn't produce that quota. They actually had all kinds of different things that the labor union had to come in and basically say, enough is enough. And so we saw the advent of labor unions. We saw the advent of industrial relations and HR. We saw civil rights and human rights, other laws start to be passed. So they played catch up. We saw in industrial revolution that pollution took off, and almost every emerging economy and every industrializing economy takes off and industrializes first, and then later goes and cleans up their mess. I don't know. I think we're almost doing the same thing. I think we're getting into this, and then we're going to have to clean up the mess. It's unfortunate, but I think sometimes we let the progress run ahead of the checks and balances. And I think that's maybe another push for that 6.0.
Dr. Mark? Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
This is Dr. Samuel.
Hello, Dr. Samuel.
I just wanted to get some clarity on the disruption that may happen in the transportation segment. We were making some presentation on that transportation may have splendid growth. We were all coming across through media that there is a chance that flying cars will become inevitable in the future. So how do you perceive this?
Thank you. Interestingly enough, when I spent those years in aerospace, air taxi might seem like something fanciful, and some of you think, well, where did you come up with that? But the reality of it is that in my time in industry, every company, a lot of them, we had entire R&D departments with already developed air taxi. And really, it comes down to FAA and safety. It's sort of like the autonomous car. The technology is absolutely there. We just have to figure out how to basically make that transition and make it work. The other thing of it is we continue to revolutionize with maybe hydrogen power and other things. I do think whether that be the flying car, whether that be an entirely new energy source behind the transportation, or whether, as the engineer from MIT so aptly suggested, we actually get down to a 200 kilogram car to move a 75 kilogram person that actually doesn't take the energy to move it from point A to point B. So no matter what it is, I do think that at some point in time, our transportation will see a new revolution. And certainly that will create its own new market, supply, demand, and it probably new challenges. Any other questions? Well, I so appreciate this opportunity to bring this to you tonight. I hope you found it informative. God bless you, and I certainly look forward to the rest of the conference. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your words of wisdom. This would definitely help the growing generations. Thank you.